All right, guys, I think we're going to get started here. Hi, everybody. My name is Corey Lawrence. Thank you for joining us today. I'm coming to you live here at WeWork in downtown Washington, D.C., and I'm one of the organizers of DC Startup Week and also the founder of IRL Agency. DC Startup Week is a year-round organization with our 5-day conference that happens every September, focused on building the startup community. And we want to give a quick shout out to our title sponsors, Next, Insperity, Wiz, and Technology Rivers. Thank you for making this week possible. If you have any questions throughout the talk, please put in all caps question at the start of your chat. So then that way we make sure that we don't miss any of your fantastic questions. And we're so excited to have Neil Shah and William Huster here to speak on how to manage your product team. So join me in welcoming Neil and William to the DC Startup Week stage.
Hey guys, thank you. And thanks for the intro. I appreciate that. We are excited to see everyone. I have with me William, who in my box is right over here, so I'm going to point to him. William, who's the CTO of ThinkNimble, and Katie, who is helping to lead our growth team. And I think I saw Nate, who's one of our software developers on the team as well, but I can't see his thing here. But it's good to meet everyone. I would ask a few things. We are, in this sort of like weird virtual presentation world for the first or second time. I don't think we've ever done something like this that's this big to a bunch of boxes in the screen. So if you are able to put your video on, I know we would all really appreciate it, just so we can see reactions, or if you want to throw a tomato at the screen if we make a mistake or whatever, I would just love to be able to see that so I can get your guys' reactions. And then the topic of this is how to manage your product team. And I think that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Which probably means we should have maybe come up with a better title for it. But I think a lot of you could be here for different reasons. Early stage companies may think of product differently than later stage companies, and product may mean engineering and technology to some folks. The presentation that we have put together is around how non-technical founders can communicate to technical teams. And when we say product, we mean engineering, product, UI, UX, and that sort of thing. But there's a whole range of things that you guys could be looking for. And so I just ask if a few of you don't mind unmuting yourselves and just saying why you're here and what you're looking to get out of the presentation, or if you want to post something in the chat, that would definitely help William, Katie, and I out in terms of figuring out what things to emphasize and talk about. And in general, we are very conversational. And so please feel free to interrupt us. You can either post something in the chat and we can stop, or we can, I think you can raise your hand through Zoom and ask us a question. But I really prefer if I'm not the one who's talking all the time and I can hear from you guys. So does someone want to kind of kick us off? What are you hoping to get out of this presentation, and what should we be thinking about as we're talking?
Sure, I'll jump in.
Sure.
So I'm post or pre-startup, looking at starting a vertical farm microgreens company that will eventually use technology, AI, robotics, to simplify the growing process, the harvest process, and establish clean produce food for urban environments at an affordable cost. So that's kind of where I'm heading.
That's great. And what specifically out of the product team conversation are you looking to get?
I guess, like, since I'm right now a solo entrepreneur looking to start and kind of grow small in the DC, Virginia area, and then eventually grow into a more established like warehouse, supplying hopefully, more cities. I'm looking to kind of lay out my, 3 to 5 year plan and kind of understand how to grow a team, how to, manage a team, and, build a company, if that makes sense.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. I know that's a big thing, is sort of the arc of, particularly for technical teams, like the arc of hiring and training and sort of like thinking about who you need at different stages of your business. So we can definitely make sure to touch on that. It's something that William and I have quite a bit of experience with. Anyone else want to jump in? What are you looking for out of this presentation, and what point should we make sure we hit?
Hey, Neil.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Please.
Yeah, so I'm a product manager right now for a bigger company, but I've worked at some smaller startups before. One question I had was how to get, as companies get bigger, engineers to be on the same page for test and learn, like a true growth team. Because I've found that at smaller companies, it's easier. The bigger you get, the less engineering can sometimes be comfortable with that.
That's great. That's a great question, and yeah, that's something that I know we have opinions on. So I'm happy to talk about that, and we can dive into that during Q&A a little bit more. But we'll make sure to hit that. I don't have a slide for that specifically, but I'll make sure we touch on that. Why don't we do one more? Anyone? Peter, I think you mentioned. Good to see you again, Peter. By the way. Anything
Yeah,
else
nice to see you too.
anything else that you're looking forward to this presentation?
Yeah, so for the subscription kind of design agency of sorts that I've created, we have been using Monday and Slack as a way to keep track of projects and to really be transparent and maintain the communication with our clients. But we see kind of a bottleneck in terms of level of the detail and organization that we want to achieve. So we've ultimately shifted, or at least are shifting over to use Bubble. So I'm using, my friends to kind of create this with the visual dragging and whatnot platform. And I've never really led a team, whether they are kind of engineering or non-engineering, in terms of building out a platform like this before. So just having a better framework to approach, like, we don't know exactly how long certain features are going to take to build, but t-shirt sizing, as we kind of discussed within the team yesterday, of like, oh, it might take, if it's small, might take 2 to 5 hours. If it's medium, it might take 5 to 10. And then the spike, which I'm also new to, is jumping into it and seeing how long it takes before committing to an actual timeline. And so those kind of things, tips and tricks are really helpful. So both framework and any kind of tips and tricks would be really helpful.
That's great. Yeah, we can definitely touch on that. That's a little bit more technical than I was thinking about getting into during this presentation. But I think, well, let's tweak the end of it, William, and let's talk a little bit about some of the tools that we use internally, so we can kind of we can jump into that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, and I'd say, like, in the second half of the presentation, we do talk about how your product team should work with your technical team a little bit, and the methodologies that we use, which don't really fit into any like Agile, Scrum bucket, but borrow a lot of concepts from them. So I don't think we use Monday for a little bit and abandoned it. Of course, we use Slack, and then I've never used Bubble, but we can talk from a high level about how we would structure your communication amongst your team, and yeah, estimation and how to handle that comes up a lot. I know, without getting too far into this, I remember, we work with multiple clients at once, right? I had a client come to me and say, how long would this specific thing take to implement? And I looked at it and I said, well, to get you a good estimate on that, I would need to do like an hour of work. And so essentially what you're asking me to do is start this task right now, ahead of everything else that we've already lined up for you in terms of priority, in front of all of my other clients. And I just can't do that right now. So all I can give you is my 5-minute estimate. And the problem with that is that it's going to have a really wide range, right? It's going to range from like 2 days to a week or something like that. That's what a 5-minute estimate will get you. But a 1-hour estimate will narrow that down. And in fact, with some tasks, the 1-hour estimate is just finishing the task. Like you get into it and you're like, oh, this is really easy. And then it's done after an hour. And that's one of the quirky things about the present state of tech, I think, is like, there are a lot of problems that are already solved, but there are certain edge cases that aren't necessarily solved yet. And so a little bit of research could either solve your problem completely or just reveal how much work you have ahead of you. We can talk about that more, but that's just a brief anecdote that reminded me of.
That's great. Cool. Okay, great. So let's jump to, assuming that the three of you are representative of everyone here, I think what we'll do is we'll kind of continue down the path of kind of talking about, it sounds like at least 2 of you guys are interested in sort of like how non-technical teams can talk to sort of technical teams, and non-technical founders can talk to technical teams. And then I think we will sort of maybe get a little bit more into the weeds near the latter half of the presentation, and we can just talk more about the tools and kind of like resources that we use internally for our team. And then if there is anything else that comes up, please post it in the chat. I'd love things to be way more conversational than presentational. So just quick background. I am Neil. I'm the CEO of ThinkNimble, and William, who just spoke, is the CTO. We started ThinkNimble to be a software development agency that focuses on startups and social change. We serve as the technical co-founder or CTO or technical partner for companies that we admire. And oftentimes we like to think of ourselves as more than just engineers, right? We do code, like a huge part of what we do is code, right? But our whole goal is not to build apps, to build websites, to build technology. It's to help build businesses. And sort of our happiest moments are the ones where we kind of see our companies grow from the seed stage to the A stage or the early stage to the to their first product or their first MVP. And it's fun to kind of have almost like a portfolio of investments that we're working alongside. In the past, we have founded startups ourselves and failed many times and had a few successes. William and I have known each other actually since we were, I believe, 6, maybe 7. I should probably know that, but 6 or 7. And we've been working together in and around technology for a very, very long time. We started a nonprofit like 15 years ago called Social Impact 360. We started a web development firm. We've worked in and around startups. I worked for EverFi, the ed tech company here in DC. William worked for SmartBear Software, a large software company in Florida. And sort of the most consistent career that we had was around tech entrepreneurship. We started a company called Aspire in 2014. That was an HR technology company. It worked with large brands like Geico, Uber, Northwestern Mutual, Carbonite, United Bank to serve employee engagement software and non-traditional perks and benefits. We started that actually in DC as part of the B2B tech accelerator called Acela Prize, which I think I see a few familiar faces. I think a few of you have been involved with in the past. And we sold that to Markham, which is a large kind of accounting consulting firm, in 2017 after growing it to a few markets and raising a few rounds of funding. While we were there at our parent company, Markham, we were sort of thinking about what our next business was going to look like. And we knew that our heart and soul was in early stage businesses. It's what we've always enjoyed. Our product team and our engineering team has always been the most fun part of our jobs and businesses in the past. And so we started ThinkNimble to be the software development agency that we wished we had while we were starting our business. We are a team of 13 entrepreneurially focused software developers and product managers. We just got an office in DuPont Circle on March 6th, which I think might be the worst time to sign on for a lease in the history of leases. But we signed on for it. We still haven't moved in, but we're excited to be kind of a big and growing part of the DC tech community. Our bread and butter, as I said, is serving as the CTO for startup clients. We kind of work in and around tech entrepreneurship. We both are investors, we both are developers, and we like sort of that intersection of technology and entrepreneurship. William, anything I missed there? Cool.
Nope, that was great.
So I think what I'll do is let's start by talking about a few common misconceptions that our clients come to us with. We'll talk about this from 2 lenses, both positive and negative misconceptions that people have. Primarily, these are from non-technical founders kind of talking about the product process. And I think this kind of sets the stage for sort of how ThinkNimble thinks about software development. The first common misconception that we often hear from early stage founders is that technology and engineering is a commodity that can be bought. And this makes sense, right? The way that as a consumer you interact with technology or products is to go on the App Store, buy a piece of software after looking at a few screenshots and a list of features at a price. And so in a similar way to how you shop for any other product off the shelf, you kind of look at these apps and you say, hey, this list of features makes sense to me. This is what I want. It's $1.99. Click buy, and then you have it, right? And I think that sort of mentality permeates, even as we go into the entrepreneurial world, that sort of mentality sort of permeates the way that we think about purchasing technology after the fact, right? We sort of think of a list of features, screenshots, and we think that that's how technology gets created. And I think we all know this, right? When you put your mind to it, technology is not that. It is a process, it is an investment, it is a long-term sort of function of your business, right? But I think as a non-technical founder, oftentimes we hear people say, hey, these are the list of features I have. How long will this take to make? What does this look like? And we think of it in terms of commodities. And obviously that is not the case. The second misconception we hear is that once you finish your product, that's it, you're done. And again, we all sort of know this is not the case, especially for a tech business where technology is sort of the central pillar of everything that you do. Signing up for building an app is signing up for building many, many versions of that app and many, many releases over the course of your business. When companies come to us and they say they want to build their MVP with us and they just want to spend a few months, kind of build it and put it out in the market, we always have like an honest conversation with them where we say, hey, look, once you build the app, you're going to get user feedback. You're going to be iterating on this. And from this point forward, for the life of your company, you will be working on and maintaining a piece of software. So are you ready to go down that path? And so, it's not a one-time thing, it's an ongoing process. The third misconception we hear is that tech work can be done separately from the rest of your business. And I think there is this sort of mentality among people that like technology is sort of this like crazy, unique, kind of cryptic science or whatever. And the truth is, it is just like every other function in your business, like marketing or sales, where the most effective tech teams are the ones that are deeply integrated with the assumptions, hypotheses, growth trajectories, visions of the company as a whole. So kind of turning those on their head and fixing them. The misconceptions sort of, changed. Are technology engineering is a research and development process. It is not a commodity, right? You need to invest time, energy, and people into building a strong process. And building the process is oftentimes more important than building the app itself. Your product, like your business, will never be finished, and you will be working on that process for the lifetime of your company. And your technology approach must be integrated with the rest of your company's strategy. We have this theory at ThinkNimble that like the most effective startups are the ones that are built around experiments. I'm part of a few investment groups here in DC, and it's always great when an entrepreneur comes and they're really honest about their investment pitch and they say, hey, look, I'm starting a business. I don't know if this is going to work. If it's going to work, these 10 things have to be true. I know that these 4 things are true. I don't know that these 6 things are true. So, hey, investment group, will you help fund an experiment that we can go down together and try and prove if these 6 things are true? You don't know if they're true. I don't know if they're true, right? But if we can prove that these things are true, this business will work, right? My startup is set up to sort of like prove that these 6 things are true. Technology is the same way, right? Like we are building experiments, we are testing hypotheses, and the most effective tech teams are the ones that are using the same hypotheses to prioritize their work as the startups are when they're building their businesses. So your tech approach must be integrated with your company's strategy. There are also positive misconceptions. A lot of folks come to us and they sort of think technology is much harder than it is. So the first misconception is that you need to be a tech whiz to build an app. And I think this may have been true like 20 years ago, but we often see that some great apps, some great startups are built around Google Forms, around Squarespace pages, around very, very simple sort of MVP versions of their applications. And we're very lucky as an industry to be standing on the shoulders of giants where so many things have been done before. And we can sort of take off the box or out of the box solutions and build businesses around them in a way that we couldn't before. We say that technology is not the hard part of building a startup. It's actually the easy part. And again, there's sort of this like idea that technology is this cryptic language that many people don't understand. But oftentimes, if you simplify it, technology is just making things go really, really fast and going really, really far, right? It's like scaling speed, right? But the hard problem is not technology. The hard problem is the business problem. It's a willingness to pay problem. It is a market question. It is a customer acquisition question. It's very rarely like a list of features and screenshots. And so if you can solve the business problems in Excel or Squarespace, you can definitely solve them using technology. And the third misconception is that tech experts can tell you exactly how long something will take to build. And Peter, I think this kind of addresses a little bit of your point, right? A lot of times, the more you get into this and the further you go, the harder these assumptions become. And the more discrete a feature is, the easier it is to kind of make an educated guess. But the best product processes are built around the idea that everything we do is a research and development process, like William was saying earlier. And it is very important that you sort of think of it that way, right? It's not a list of features that have an exact amount of time like a factory floor would be, but it's more like researching a drug or sort of going through an experiment where you're sort of iterating and experimenting and kind of learning as you go. So fixing those. It's never been easier to build an app. Fitting your business to the problem at hand is the hard part. Tech just makes things go really, really fast. And anyone who claims to know how long it'll take, we said is probably lying, but is probably misrepresenting how simple or easy the feature is. When entrepreneurs come to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Real quick, Neil. Yeah, just one nuance in all of that too. Talking about tech as a commodity. I think one place where it's easy to confuse the product process or product development with a commodity is that over time, things that once were sort of integral to a product process have become commoditized. Things that 20 years ago you had to build yourself in order to achieve a certain outcome for your technology. Now you can buy off the shelf and you're comparing solutions. So a good example is like chat. 10 years ago, if you wanted to build chat into your app, you kind of had to implement that yourself. There weren't any off the shelf solutions. Today, solutions like Twilio and to a certain extent AWS have you covered on those things. But what all that means is that your tech team now focuses on slightly higher level concerns, and that's actually a good thing for your product development process because that brings them closer to your business problem. So now you're putting together multiple different sort of off-the-shelf solutions, but what you're ultimately building is still, if you have a good idea, something that's never been built before, and that's the research and development process that we're talking about. And so saying like you can buy a tech team like a commodity is almost like saying you can buy a startup idea or buy your startup as a commodity, and that obviously is an absurd idea. So yeah, just putting a little bit more nuance on that. You know, Neil and I did consulting and web development 10 years ago, building WordPress sites for people. It was very lucrative. Since then, it's not so much lucrative anymore because there's Squarespace, there's Wix. And so when people come to us with this idea for, say, an online brochure for their site or a marketing site to go along with their app or something like that, we don't ever offer to build that because it's just not worth the time and money anymore. Unless they want to do something extremely special with it, it's better to just go with Squarespace or Wix. And so that's an example of the commoditization of a very specific thing. But the good news is now they don't need to pay their tech team to do stuff that they can do themselves. We can focus on making their app really great. So again, the concerns have kind of raised to a higher level of abstraction, which is great.
Thanks, William. Yeah, I totally agree with all that. I'm going to skip through these next few slides and kind of get into the meat of how you work with a product team, because it does seem like there were some questions around that topic. Just sort of a high-level summary here. A lot of entrepreneurs come to us very early. Product is very addictive, and building technology is very addictive. And oftentimes, it's a very easy thing to distract yourself with. As I said before, building a business, the hard part is the human question, right? The easy part is the technology question. If you can show that someone is willing to buy something, there's a feature that someone really needs, there's a piece of technology that someone really needs, and it's something that would make their life better, building it is the easy part, right? Like, but actually figuring that out, identifying how to get that solution in front of people, that is the hard part, right? So many entrepreneurs come to us way too early, before they need a product team. And they say, hey, I've got this idea. I want to connect teachers to curricula all across the United States. I don't know exactly how it's going to work. I just know I have this kind of general concept. Can you help me build that, right? And although, at all points in time, advice is always useful, and sort of like, technical guidance is always useful, right? Oftentimes, like, that is something that it's not worth spending money on very early on, right? Like, there's other ways to kind of prove the answer to that. So the high level is we find that people are going way too early into the idea of building an app. And I think the investor community and accelerator community has sort of supported this by saying that most businesses need a technical co-founder. And I just don't think at this point, I don't think that's necessarily true. So if you find yourself as a non-technical founder without a technical co-founder, that's not the worst thing in the world, right? There are many ways to kind of get around that. And there are many successful businesses that have been started by non-technical founders that did sort of like scrappy ways of getting started before they actually built. I will skip that. Okay, so a lot of people think they need to learn how to talk tech and learn how to code in order to work with a tech team. And I think this is sort of the crux of what we're going to get into today is, as non-technical founders talk to product teams, the most important thing is not the technology. It is the human questions. It is the requirements. It is the understanding of sort of the bigger pictures of what your users are going to be doing. It's the business questions. So don't get caught in the idea that you have to be able to talk about code or servers or APIs or whatever to be able to talk to an engineering team. Your expertise as a non-technical founder is in your domain, which is the industry that you're working in, the people that you talk to, the customers that you're interacting with. The engineers can worry about the engineering part, but what they need from you is sort of the answers and the scope around what you'll be building. So the good tech team should be able to take those requirements and those ideas and be able to translate them into technology. That's what their function is. Your function as a non-technical founder is to provide clear requirements, tied to clear priorities, and sort of create that hypothesis and structure so that your product team can go to town and build the thing that you need to make your business work. William, I'll pass it off to you, but before I go any further, are there any questions right now or any thoughts that anyone has about what we've talked about that we can address? And then I'll pass it over to William to kind of talk through some tactics and ideas for how to translate those requirements into text speed.
Quick question. Hi,
Yeah.
my Ade. Just real quick, I'm just curious. You said some people can start too early thinking they need tech team, but they don't really need it. What about is it something about prototyping? Is prototyping help out with that, or can you touch on that?
Yeah. I think, yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of reasons that you'd want to build an app, right? And probably the best reason, and I can go back here, probably the best reason is if you have a customer who is interested in trying out your app, right? And you were sort of want to see, can you build something very simple that will accommodate that use case, right? And build a user experience around that. I think a lot of times people want to build prototypes for different reasons than that. They want to show an investor that they have an idea or a screenshot or a mock-up. They want to show some early customers and kind of figure out if they want to build it. Clickable walkthroughs, clickable prototypes, clickable screenshots, sort of get 80% of that without spending the 2 or 3 months it takes to build something. And I think a lot of times those sorts of early stage prototypes are actually like just much more efficient, much more scrappy tools to get those things done. But again, it sort of depends on your industry. You know, it depends on sort of what you're trying to build, whether the investment in the prototype makes sense. William, any thoughts on that?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we start many early stage product development processes with a prototype. I think you do, as Neil was saying, kind of have to decide what level of prototype is right for your specific idea. So, you know, right now I think it's really popular to explore ideas with remote solutions that require video and audio, and video and audio is technically on sort of the more sophisticated end of things. And so for an idea like that, yeah, you may need to go and at an earlier stage and talk to a tech team about how you could set up a prototype for that. But be very clear with them that, you know, it's just a prototype. It doesn't need to be scalable. You're not trying to build a production ready app or things like that. On the other end of the spectrum, though, which is where a lot of ideas come in from other domains that aren't purely tech. For example, a friend of Neil's is building out a game that you can play with your company, right? As a team building game where you manage a balloon amusement park. And we actually did it as a team. It was a lot of fun. He prototyped the whole thing in Google Sheets. And so they had some pretty impressive calculations, and you could call them algorithms that they were running through Google Sheets. So we did the game. We gave our answers to the problems and collaborated over Zoom. And so again, he didn't have to build any of the video technology and stuff like that. And it worked really well. And he was able to give us our results almost immediately at the end of the game, and even gave people different awards for different things that they had done. And so it was actually quite sophisticated, and none of it required a technical team to build an app. Now they are exploring the next step, which is to build an app, but they want to sell this and try it out with a few different teams first and tweak their methods and their algorithms and things like that before they hand it over to a tech team. And I think that's extremely smart. And so that's kind of what these slides are getting at. Think about how far you can get before you pull the trigger on hiring tech talent, because it can be very expensive to do that experimentation loop with another team. And then you also end up, I think, burning a lot of overhead in the cycles of communication and things like that with a tech team. The more people you add to your team, the more complicated communication becomes. Whereas if it's just you sitting in front of an Excel document and trying out what works and what doesn't, and then taking that to customers, you can iterate a lot faster because it's just you focused on that problem. And that actually kind of goes to the next slide about the loop. Yeah, I don't know if there's any other questions.
Yeah, and actually, it looks like Krishna, you had a question that I think is a great question. I'd love to address that with the group if you don't mind bringing it up.
Yeah, sure. I was wondering, just as you guys have had a lot of repeats with clients, if they are dead set on building something and they will not accept an interactive prototype, even though it's proven to work, what have you used that's kind of a repeat tool for getting something out there? Just, has a minimal database and UI, if there's anything that's been used a few times for this real version.
Interesting. Yeah. So I'm a big proponent of building, especially if you think you think you're going to be invested in it long term, building your prototype on the tools that you'll use sort of long term. And there are some limitations of that. So trying to figure out, okay, so just specifically what we use as a team is what we call our Bootstrapper. It's a Django backend with a Vue.js front end, and we build a lot of tooling around that. What we're able to do with that is scale it to various sizes, right? So in theory, we could scale this out. I think it's Instagram, Discuss, some really big players have used Django as a backend at scale, and so it's sort of proven. But for getting a quick prototype up, we can do that, in an afternoon, and we can put it up on a single Heroku instance, and it's something that a customer can go in and play around with almost immediately, and then it scales out to that, with a lot of work, can scale out to a much larger size down the line. So I am a big proponent of choosing a tool that you don't have to necessarily switch from once you get out of the prototype phase, and tools like Vue.js and Django are really great for that. Now at scale, you start to run into some optimization issues with those, and it's then becomes a good idea to start tacking on microservices, maybe written in other languages and stuff like that. But that, I'll set that aside for a moment. Does that answer your question?
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and I do think Brad has a good point. Hi, Brad. I didn't realize you were here, but I was actually about to mention you, and then I saw that you posted in the chat. But there are a lot of like low-code and no-code frameworks out there that are pretty good to get something up and running. And they've gotten a lot more sophisticated. Brad actually did a demo for me a couple of weeks ago where he walked through a few apps that he had built on QuickBase, and it's just amazing, like the sort of functionality and scope of what can happen now by just like dragging and dropping widgets together. It sort of feels like the heyday of WordPress apps, right? Where like before, building a website was a super customized thing, and then sort of the bottom 80% of the market got commoditized and simplified through Squarespace and WordPress. I think the same thing is happening to apps right now, right? And tools like Airtable, QuickBase, and some of these other low-code, no-code frameworks are really good tools to get some prototypes up and running quickly. And talk to Brad about that if you want to talk more about that, because he knows a lot. Cool. So I'll just to save some time for questions, William, I'll just pass it off to you, and if you want to run through some of those latter half of the slides, and then we can
for sure. Yeah, I think what I'll do with this, since it seems like again, we kind of put this presentation together more for like non-technical founders, but you guys seem a little bit further along. So I'm just going to throw some of these things out there, and then we can dig more into the technical stuff as people want to, of how we think about these different methodologies. So this is what we call an effective way of working. I was talking before about that feedback loop, about communication either with your tech team or with your customers and things like that. I think underlying a good product process is that fundamental feedback loop and how quickly your cycles are. And so if you start at the top of this diagram, it says customer input flows in. In the beginning, you might just be projecting what you think your customers want before you actually have customers. Although I think it would be a good idea to talk to prospective customers before you start building anything. And then use that to define your scope. And so that's the thing at the top. Your scope is user stories and requirements. We'll talk about what a user story is in case you're not familiar. And again, we borrow a lot from Agile and Scrum, but I wouldn't necessarily call our process, I wouldn't put it in one of those boxes. I like to think about it a little bit more abstractly than that. From user stories, you go into design. Here you might start to put together mockups or what they call wireframes. We'll look at some examples of that. And then when you're going from this point onward, then you're starting to work with your tech team. So you might put together user stories in your design and stuff like that. And then I have what I call the priority subloop. That's where you go to your tech team and you show them the list of things that you want to do, and you prioritize with them. You ask them, okay, what's going to be really hard? And you weigh the level of effort against the value of the thing that you're talking about. And I think actually that's a really good framework for decision making, kind of trying to line everything up by some sort of multiple of value and level of effort. So that's what priority subloop means, is you're kind of going back and forth with your dev team to calibrate your priorities. You get, as a part of that, you get estimates you start to put those together. I've actually tried to start moving away from the word estimates on our team and more into the word budgets, because I think it sets a better expectation on all sides. And I also think it is more motivating as a developer, because you look at it and you say, I'm going to try to take this as far as I can in 1 week, right? So it's not about saying this will take me 1 week. It's about saying I think I feel good about spending a week on this, that I can get a good outcome for the business within that week. So I really prefer to look at it as budgets. And from a business perspective, it is a budget. You're allocating some of your time and money to a particular thing, and that's informed by the priorities that you set in the previous step. Implementation is when developers sit down and write code. that should be aimed at getting things out to testing as soon as possible. And so that's really important for me on our team. I try to hammer this home. We work in like 1 week sprints, again, borrowing it from Scrum, but it's not Scrum. But by the end of that week, we want to say, okay, what are the outcomes? And when we define the outcomes, we're saying, what can a user do at the end of this week that they weren't able to do at the beginning of the week? For that outcome to have been met, software needs to be at least in a staging environment for the client to touch it, for ideally even for customers to touch it. So we need to deliver what we implement every single week. And so part of this is also about scoping things down into bite-sized chunks so that you can deliver testable software as quickly as possible. And that improves, again, the speed of the feedback loop. The validation subloop is just this back and forth of like, oh, this is working or not working the way I expected it to. There's a bug here or whatever. You clean that stuff up and then you deploy it and you try to get it out to customers as soon as possible so you can get more feedback. And so the whole goal is to go around this loop as quickly as possible. A high functioning development team is turning this at least once a week, maybe even faster. It depends on exactly what you're working on at any given time. All right, someone asks, are you doing this as continuous integration? Yes. So we have continuous integration set up on Bitbucket pipelines. We are encouraging our team to write as many tests as possible, which aids in that process. We do not rely 100% on continuous integration or continuous delivery. We have a code review process. So there is a manual process. The test pass, the build passes, but somebody still goes in there and says, okay, this looks good. We're going to merge it into the main line of development. That's just us, a smaller team. I think that's because we're managing a lot of different clients. And so we have to have a few more control processes in place. For a single product team with a lot of developers, you may choose to go 100% continuous integration and just let anybody merge into the main line whenever, as long as their build is passing. I think for really effective continuous integration, you need very good test coverage. So you need to also automate like checking how much of your code is covered by tests and maybe set a minimum threshold on that. At the early stage of product development, that is not always desirable or practical or it might just get in your way to try to set a minimum threshold for test coverage because you might just be throwing that code out, if you're in sort of the late prototype stage or something like that. So it's a good question. I could go on about that, but I'm not. So I appreciate that. Jump to the next slide. So this is again, this kind of goes back to stuff we already talked about, but this is the product process. You're exploring. Somebody said test and learn, and building out a growth team. You're exploring okay solutions, bad solutions, good solutions to get to what you feel is the optimal solution. And I think you need to look at it this way. Again, it's all a process. It's not like you're going to start with your problem and go straight to the solution because you have a tech expert who knows exactly what to do in every case. Every tech expert will recommend to you, I think we need to test this. I'm not sure if it's going to work, but here's what we can build to try it out. And then at the end of the day, we're going to find our best solution. Next. So yeah, here are some practical things you can do without tech knowledge. You can write your user stories. You can educate your tech team about your domain. I think that developers have a lot more to learn from you about what your business is trying to achieve than you have from them about the tech. Make simple boxes and arrows mockups. You can use tools like Google Drawing is great for this. You can use PowerPoint. It's, even if you are not artistically inclined, if you have a good tech team who's willing to sort of engage in the conversation with you, a few boxes and a few arrows will get the point across. And it's really funny, when Neil and I were working on Aspire, we'd go to a whiteboard and I don't know if Neil can actually draw like a square box, but so he'd like draw like this weird like trapezoid thing and put a few arrows. And then I'd be like, oh yeah, I get it. Cause I understood the business domain because Neil had been very good at telling me about what Aspire was trying to accomplish and about the HR world and what he was hearing from investors and from clients and stuff like that. And that is the more important knowledge. And then when you go into the design phase or specifying user stories, it's more about talking about what can the user do and what does it generally look like? And a good tech team can translate that for you. Be clear about your target outcomes and priorities. I kind of actually think of all tech work as one long queue. And so there's really only one thing at the top of the queue that you're really focused on at any given time, and everything else, you just have to ignore it until you get down to that level. If you keep switching back and forth between different things, you'll end up with a mess. You'll end up with a lot of bugs and not the outcomes that you want. So again, prioritization and clarity are really important to an effective development process, in my opinion. And then deeply analyze and weigh trade-offs. A good tech team will tell you what the trade-offs are, and you should demand that from them, and then use that to inform your prioritization. So user journeys, again, I'm going to go through these real quick, but here's a quick diagram of what a user journey might look like. This is from Aspire. So you have on the left, you have users coming in, they're coming in from different channels. This is how we want to funnel them. Each of these boxes sort of represents a screen that we built into the product. So we had our marketing website, which was actually built on WordPress. It wasn't integrated into the app, but then there were these hyperlinks that took you into the app. And these are the screens that we built and the flow that we were aiming for. And so this is very outcomes oriented. You see in the bottom right, the ultimate goal was to get them to that first event booked. And so all arrows need to sort of point in that direction. And wherever we had drop off, we wanted to capture that, so that priority is captured in here. And so again, very simple diagram, boxes and arrows. This could be drawn on the back of a napkin. It doesn't have to look as nice as this does, as long as it gets the same point across. And then, so user journeys are sort of like, where is the user going overall? What's their end goal? User stories are individual things, like the user should be able to go to this site, the user should be able to click this button to go to this page, and so on. So they're much more zoomed in, and this is a good template for a user story. And this is a good way to present, a list of these to your tech team in priority order. Is a really great way to present what you want a piece of software to do. So it's, as a type of user, I want to be able to do something so that I can reach a goal. And you can deviate a little bit from this template, but as a rule of thumb, this will serve you really well. So if we look at a bad user story, users want to be able to see all of their data on the dashboard. This is bad because it's way too vague. Which users, usually very few apps only have one type of user. So which type of user wants to be able to see what data on what dashboard, you need to clarify those things. If you say something like this, nobody's on the same page. So a better example of a user story, again, this is going to be a little bit vague, just because, we're not all talking about the same product here, but hopefully it gets the idea across about being more specific about the user type and stuff. So as a company admin, I want to be able to see a summary of employee activity across my company so I can make informed changes. So the last phrase there defines the outcomes you're trying to achieve. At the very beginning, you're saying exactly which type of user you want to be able to see what type of data. Pat, we'll come back to your question. I'll finish this out and then we'll come back to your question. Next, so share knowledge about your domain, educate your tech team about your business domain. By domain, I mean, like, if you're in HR, there's probably a lot of jargon and terms and things that HR people just sort of understand between each other, and a lot of shortcut words and things like that. So that's your domain. So educating your tech team about that helps them make sure that they're speaking the same language. I would even go so far. There's a great book by Eric Evans called Domain Driven Design. I would recommend everyone pick that up and read through it. It's about creating a ubiquitous language for your product and tech teams. So I would go so far as to say that the code should use the same words for entities and objects as the HR people are using in their conversations or when they're trying to communicate with the tech team. And that will make things run a lot more smoothly. And again, your engineers probably have more to learn about that than you do. And the hard part is solving your business problem, not the tech problem. Boxes and arrows mockups. Again, these probably look nicer than they need to. But on the right, you have an example of like what the app will finally look like. If this were a mockup, you might call it a high fidelity mockup. And then on the left, you have what you might call a low fidelity mockup. Some people call them wireframes. It's just boxes. There's no colors. There's no specificity here, but it doesn't contain less. The important thing is it doesn't contain less information. It contains the same amount of information about what you should see on the screen and how you would interact with the screen and what the user is trying to accomplish. So low fidelity does not mean low information. I think a lot of people make that mistake of thinking that it does. The only information missing from the one on the left is visual design, but from a functionality and feature standpoint, it has all the information that I would need as a developer to build a prototype or build the first version of it. And we can figure out how to make it look good later. and that goes also to other like flow charts and diagrams and stuff that you're making. Set clear priorities and examine trade-offs. Again, I think focus is absolutely the key to rapid quality software delivery. So try to focus on only like 1 or 2 really important things in a given day, in a given week. It depends on the size of the thing that you're trying to tackle. Don't jump around too much. Don't switch contexts too much. Try to finish something to whatever degree you need it finished before you move on to the next thing. And so that's sort of what this slide is about. Line everything up from most to least important to you. You could quantify it in terms of t-shirt size or like 1 to 10 business value. And then when your tech team brings back level of effort estimates, kind of multiply those together to get like the final like overall value of something. I think that's a really good way to kind of get your list lined up. And also, your priorities are going to change. And so this needs to be a continuous process. It can't be something that you just do at the front of a project and never change. Every single week, you should be reevaluating this list. First of all, updating your progress. And then second of all, saying, okay, how's the forward going with everything we've learned up to this point? How is the forward going roadmap going to change? How are we going to reprioritize that if we need to? And what's it look like? I think that's it for the quick tips.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, and I think yeah, that's excellent. I know we sort of have different levels of kind of like technical questions that people are asking, and so I do want to make sure, just before we go into the Q&A portion of things, I do want to just say we have an initiative that we're kind of putting together right now where we want every one of our software developers and product managers to serve as an advisor or a board member for a local nonprofit or a local startup. We bill ourselves as being entrepreneurial software developers, and a lot of our engineers have started a business before, so they sort of understand the like right pressure, right time mentality of building a business. And oftentimes having like some hard technical advice is really helpful for early stage founders. And so we are trying to do that. It makes our engineers a lot better in the work that they're doing and sort of understanding their own trade-off decisions. So if you guys are interested in that, please let me know. And even if you're not interested in that specifically, there's going to be a lot more questions, I think, that come out of this than we're going to be able to do in the next 10 minutes. And so please reach out to me. I think I've got my email in here somewhere, just neil@thinknimble.com or katie@thinknimble.com. And I'll put it in the chat here in a second. Please set up a time to chat. I really do love talking to startups and kind of helping people out on the technical side of things. And I am more than happy to kind of continue this conversation out of this session. So take me up on that, please. Okay, so let's open it up to questions.
Yeah, Pat had a couple questions that we could start with. Do you want to take those, Neil? Or the first one is, do you test?
Yeah. Well, why don't you take the testing one? Do you test the same way every time, or are you developing tests?
Yeah, so I'd say our goal is to have a test plan for every major feature. So the more that can be user story driven, the better. Saying, if you say the user should be able to invite somebody from this screen, and that should send out, and then that should send out an email and stuff like that. Having that written down somewhere, whether it's just like a Google Doc or we were going to talk about tools that we use. So we use Jira for project management, and we use Confluence as our primary sort of like documentation and coordination tool. They are big sort of enterprisey softwares, and they kind of feel clunky for a small startup. I'll be completely upfront about that, but they have worked well for us, and they've scaled out well as we've brought on clients and things like that for us. Yeah, so what we try to do is put testing plans into Confluence. So saying there's this feature set, the create event feature set, let's say, where a user should be able to go and create a new event, set the start time, the end time, maybe upload a photo for it, write a description for it, all of those things. So the way we write test plans is we say each of those things. The user should be able to click on this page. They should see a form that lets them enter the start time, end time, and all of that. And so it'll say like, verify that this is there, verify that this is there, verify that this is there. And so we write it almost sort of like a pseudocode outline of the steps that you should be able to take to accomplish a specific goal within the software. And again, setting that goal, setting that outcome, that user outcome is really important. Everything else sort of follows from that and leads to that in the end. So that's how we define the test plans. And the great thing about sort of writing that as pseudocode or writing that in a very formulaic way is that then you could hand that back to a developer and they could script that. And then it becomes just part of automated integration. I think that's the ideal scenario for a more mature product, is to have all of this coverage so that as you're making changes going forward, you're catching anything that you broke accidentally. You're catching that. Those are called regressions. Any place where functionality that was working before has now regressed to a state where it's no longer working. But as a starter, just having a document in text that anybody can read and follow along, step 1, step 2, step 3, is a great way to get started with quality testing.
And actually, I think that and the user story question, I'd be happy to send you guys examples of those. So if you send me an email and you're like, hey, we have a list of kind of, I'll have to check to see what we're allowed to share, but we can send you over a list of kind of business requirements, a user story document, and then also a sample test plan if that's helpful for you guys. And I wish we had one we could show on the screen right now, but if you just shoot me an email, we can send you those things afterwards so you can see some examples that you can borrow from. Are there any other questions that people have about interacting with your product team that we can answer? I know Corey said he wanted to end in like 6 minutes here, so I just want to make sure we honor that. Any questions that everyone has? Great, easy group.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanna, maybe if you're holding back because you have sort of a deeper question that you're afraid we don't have time for, definitely email us. Neil put his email in there. Mine is william@thinknimble.com. I'd be happy to have a call with you or something.
Yeah, there's William. But yeah, shoot us a note. Yeah, really appreciated having everyone join and getting to briefly talk to everyone. There's so much to cover, I think, in managing and working with the product team. It's something that we think about day in and day out. If you guys are ever looking for technical help, or if you just want to bounce ideas off of someone, sometimes it helps to have an engineer just sort of in the room kind of listening to your stuff. And so we're always happy to do that. Like I said, it's a big initiative of ours that I'm trying to get all of our developers to spend less time coding and more time interacting with entrepreneurs. So the more we can do that, the better. Shoot me a note and we can talk. That's about it. William, anything else?
No, that's all. I appreciate you guys listening.
All right, guys.
Great,
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you guys, Neil and William, for a fantastic discussion on how to manage your product team. We appreciate your time and support of the DC Startup Week community today. Definitely, I would say, like, definitely take them up on reaching out. I think there's a lot of good insights here and a lot of really good questions there at the beginning as well. So I think there's a lot more to dig in there. So another quick thing, in about 5 minutes, top of the hour, we've got 3 more sessions happening here at DC Startup Week. We've got protecting your intellectual property, patenting apps and software. We've got making social impact essential to your business from day one. And we also have workplace superheroes. Great managers are your secret weapon to loyal, engaged employees. So I hope to see you guys on some more sessions today, and we'll see you guys later.